Hello everyone, today we're going to be looking at Gothic horror. Let's begin. So our lesson objectives today are to be able to develop an understanding of the key features of work belonging to the Gothic horror genre, and also to gain an understanding of the importance of setting in Gothic horror. Okay, so what is the Gothic horror genre? I'm first going to define the definition of horror and then link that to the definition of Gothic. So, horror elicits fear or fright. It's usually about ghosts and the supernatural beings and is surrounded by mystery. The definition of Gothic is pertaining to a style of literature characterized by a gloomy setting, grotesque, mysterious, or violent events, and an atmosphere of degeneration and decay. It's also been of a genre that is contemporary fiction. It's typically relating the experiences of an often ingenuous heroine imperiled at an old mansion where she typically becomes involved with a stern or mysterious but attractive man. It also relates to the medieval and often crude or barbarous. So it's quite a lot of things linked to decay, linked to it's really dark and mysterious as well. So from that definition, looking at horror and Gothic, can you create your own spider diagram, putting down what you think the features of Gothic horror would be? You can pause the video right here and have a go and then come back. Okay, so this is the checklist of what makes a work Gothic horror, and it can be a combination of at least some of these elements. So these are the elements: a castle, and this castle could be ruined or intact, haunted or not; ruined buildings which are sinister or which arouse a pleasing melancholy; dungeons, underground passages, crypts, and catacombs, which in modern houses become spooky basements or attics; labyrinths, dark corridors and winding stairs; shadows, a beam of moonlight in the blackness, a flickering candle, or the only source of light failing. It could be a candle blown out or an electric failure. You could also have extreme landscapes like rugged mountains, thick forests, or icy wastes, and extreme weather. Omens and ancestral curses. You could also have magic, supernatural manifestations, or the suggestion of the supernatural. You could have a passion-driven, willful villain who's a hero, so a villain hero, or a plain simply a villain. You could also have a curious heroine with a tendency to faint and a need to be rescued frequently, a hero whose true identity is revealed by the end of the novel, or horrifying or terrifying events, or the threat of such happenings. Let us look at a real novel, a real example. Frankenstein is a popular example of a text belonging to Gothic horror. It's also a text that's used in secondary schools. What features above help to identify this as such as an example? And let's really drill down and see what the examples are. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. So already the setting is very dark and dreary, and the writer has used pathetic fallacy to really reflect that this is going to be ominous. It's going to be a dark novel with an anxiety that almost amounting to agony. I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 a.m. The rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out. So the failing light that we spoke about in the checklist, when by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe, or how delineate the wretch whom with such infinite pains and care I had endeavored to form? His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful, beautiful, great God. His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness, but these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same color as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shriveled complexion and straight black lips. So almost this description is very grotesque, and a lot of juxtaposition, a lot of contradictions. So it has a lustrous hair, but then it had yellow skin. Even though his teeth was pearly white, his skin was dun, and a dun white is almost a gray. So all of these are really grotesque because of all the contradictions there. The different accidents of life are not so changeable as the feeling of human nature. I had worked hard for nearly 2 years for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this, I had deprived myself of rest and health. I had desired it with an ardor that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I had created, I rushed out of the room and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. At this point, I want you to think, who is the villain in this story? Because he has created Frankenstein, okay? He has created this monster and just left him. The monster is now created and wants his father, but the father has abandoned him because he's so grotesque. Who is the real monster in this? So let us further unpick what I've just read. So we know that Frankenstein is a popular example of a text belonging to the Gothic horror. There are some features that we need to consider, and I started to talk about them. So you need to think about the horror conventions or ingredients. You need to think about the dramatic and horror words that he uses and the contrasting words, the narrative style, what is happening in this section. Also, words to show that this was written in the 1800s, and the character's fear. He's quite fearful when he meets this monster that he has created. The character's mixed feelings about his creation, and also words to describe the monster. And I would like you to think about that and comment below what you think. Okay, before I end this tutorial, I wanted to really highlight the importance of setting in Gothic horror. Setting is very important in Gothic horror. Typically, it is unfamiliar to the reader and often is quite eerie and remote. Popular settings include castles, medieval architecture, and the like. The setting plays an important part in creating and arousing the suspense that surrounds Gothic horror. Let's look at the example below, and I've read this earlier, so I'm just really focusing on the setting. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 in the morning. The rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. So, it is a very, it's eerie and it's remote. We know that. And it aroused suspense. We see this yellow, terrifying eye open, and it's quite dramatic and creates that suspense. We have come to the end of another tutorial, but we need to review the lesson objectives, and I would like you to write down the following: something that you have learned, something you wish to know more about, and something you have enjoyed. Please write those in the comments below so that I can have a look at that. It will be useful for me. It's also useful for you to reflect on what you have learned. Thanks again for joining me in this tutorial, and until the next one, stay blessed. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.